I know why Niagara, Arkansas no longer exists. Written by Bess Korea Forever. By the time you read this, the town I'm currently sitting in will no longer exist. I'll no longer exist. I'll tell you its name. You can Google it or check the encyclopedia. Hell, you can get in your car and drive out here. I promise, you won't find it. Let me tell you a little about who I am and why I'm here, and then you'll understand why you won't find it anymore. There's no way in hell this place can continue to stand after what happened. I came to Niagara, Arkansas about 2 weeks ago as part of an emergency medical response unit on loan from the Army. About a dozen of us went through Benning, and then an overnight out to a podunk dirt airstrip in the Ozarks. I questioned why we didn't head into Little Rock Air Base, but nobody seemed to know. This was well outside my normal duties. 18 Delta, Special Forces Medical Sergeant. I got voluntold to go, so there I was. As the saying goes, orders is orders. I deal with combat injuries requiring field expedient medicine, also known as patching holes in grunts who get fucked up downrange, dealing with acute lead poisoning, or the occasional idiot who forgets water is a thing and gets heat stroke. Normal stuff. Not this shit. They rolled us into the local hospital. It was a large, ugly concrete building that looked like it belonged in a Soviet housing block. National Guard posted up around the building in full battle rattling, giving off some serious go away vibes. Something interesting had been going on, or I wouldn't be there. Yet, this was some next level shit. They gave us full PPE, masks, respirators, hoods, booties, you name it. All they told us at that point was, people are sick. Control it. Control it. I'm not sure why I didn't start asking questions right then and there. I've got a bullshit detector as finely tuned as anyone else, considering how long I've been in the military. I knew from Jump Street that something was wrong. I assumed it was bureaucratic nonsense. Some limp dick with a bird wants to look good and blows everything out of proportion so he can save the day. And snag another promotion, of course. So, I played along, got suited and booted, and headed inside. I was in no way prepared for this. There were people littered all over the main hallway of the hospital. They were on cots, gurneys, blankets, sleeping bags, even on the counters. The entire population of the town had to be there. You couldn't move 2 feet without stepping on someone, which happened quite a bit. Since visibility is terrible with a hood and respirator, let me tell you. Have you ever seen something so disgusting that you could imagine the smell without being able to actually smell it? These people were in bad shape. Dried crimson and brown bodily fluids on and around them. Thick, chunky yellow vomit smeared across their faces and chests. Their eyes, the color of old mustard. Something generally reserved for the extremely fucked. You could hear their labored, wheezing breaths, sticky with mucus and fluid. Even over the loud ventilation and swishing of the Ty-Cam suits. If there was a place that needed to be lit up and nuked from orbit, it was this hospital. These were some messed up people. I immediately asked the next man up the chain what in the holy fuck was going on. All he would tell me was that this was a sensitive situation, and we needed to do exactly what they said. The look on his face told me to shut up and stop asking questions. So I did. I assumed this was some sort of super Ebola outbreak. Or maybe Class A airborne herpes AIDS, because I've never seen something jack people up like this. It was unnatural. Our orders were simple: avoid contact with fluids, don't take off our SCBA, and report all bodies immediately. We were under no circumstances to handle the corpses. I couldn't tell if it was airborne or spread by fluid, so I decided to 100% follow those instructions to the letter. Anything to get my ass home safe. It immediately became a daily routine. We checked on the patients, cleaned them up as best we could, took their vitals, and tried to give them fluids. This wasn't medical care. It was hospice bordering on abuse. None of them could eat anymore, and even getting the water down was an impossible task. We weren't administrating any type of medication. I wasn't sure at the time why they didn't have normal hazmat trained nurses doing this. I didn't think too far into it because of 2 words: hazard pay. I know now it was a matter of security and keeping things deniable. A week in, I found that my initial guess was right. The entire town was in this hospital. 4 floors, packed asses, and elbows amongst the dead and dying. They brought in healthy-looking people and threw them in with the diseased masses. They instructed us to sedate them. A few hours later, their skin would turn pale, their eyes would grow dull and sickly, and the vomiting would begin. Every single time. These were the people who didn't report to the hospital when the outbreak began. They had teams out there, rounding them up. At this point, I was so disillusioned that I never stopped to think about how terrible it was. They told us they were exposed, and we went with it. It was easier that way. My days went by on autopilot. Check the patients in my area, attempt to clean them up, record their vitals, call in any corpses. And there were always corpses. More and more every day. I can deal with the sick and dying. I've seen worse in my time overseas. But this was on a different level. When they died, they began to bloat. More than a stiff in the hot sun of Afghanistan would after a week unattended. A thick, clear, sticky-looking substance would ooze out of their pores. Their eyes would bulge and their stomachs would distend. The team that took them away wore even heavier duty PPE than we did. Shit, that looked like it would be more at home with an EOD team rather than in a hospital. I got one of the guys to admit that everything went into the incinerator. Body, clothing, even the monitoring equipment hooked up to them at the time. Whoosh, burned, gone. He joked that you didn't want to see the bodies in the furnace because they popped. He told me that I wouldn't believe the shit that came out of them. I kept telling myself that he was joking anyway. Gallows humor. More and more people died as time went on. The ones that didn't likely wish they had. And I wish they had too. Nobody deserves to suffer like that. The days ticked past, and we were down to a few dozen patients left, all contained in one wing of the first floor. If I had to guess, 90% of the town was dead inside the first 10 days. Everything was automatic now. Wake up, suit on, tape the seams, decon in, 12 hours in the ward, decon out, undress, unwind, pass out. If you're forced to see this much devastation day in and day out, you become numb to it. I imagine that's how it happened. The people in my section wouldn't even take water anymore. They had been barely hanging on by a thread. We'd move on days ago to giving them ice chips. They sometimes spat them out as they hacked up that thick yellow mucus/vomit concoction, but it was better than leaving them to die of dehydration. We still had no idea what the end goal was, aside from monitoring them until they expired. There was never any talk of a cure or research or anything. Thinking back, I never once saw anyone who claimed to be from CDC, WHO, or any other medical organization. Everyone was military or dying on the ground. I should have questioned that sooner. I approached my last patient in the row. I didn't know his name. Hell, I didn't know any of their names, if I'm being honest. It made it easier to deal with what was going on. I leaned over with the large plastic cup of ice chips and tipped it into the man's mouth. He shuddered and spasmed. His coughing became rapid and violent, and the ice chips sprayed out all over my gear. I hurried to wipe the slurry of puke and yellow ooze off my mask and gloves. That was when I felt it. A razor-thin line of cold running down my forearm. Time slowed to a crawl as I felt it drip off my elbow, impacting the inside of my suit. I imagine I could hear the tiny plop it made as the liquid struck the synthetic material. Looking down, I could see the tiny seam between the sleeve and my outer glove where the tape had come loose. A minuscule gap, imperceptible at first, but large enough to sign my death warrant. I panicked. I didn't tell anyone. I pushed the tape back into place and checked on the John Doe responsible for this mess. He had choked to death during my moment of silent introspection. I called in the burn team and tried to go through the motions for the rest of the day. My mind was going in a million directions at once, debating if I should tell command or try to sneak out without anyone noticing. Please know that I am not proud of what I did, but most of you reading this would have done the same. I went through decontamination, ran to the bathroom, and scrubbed my arm until it bled. I thought that, despite everything I had seen, I would be okay. Maybe it wasn't actually contagious anymore. The first thing I noticed this morning was that my eyes had taken on a jaundiced hue, and my skin had grown pallid. Others in the tight-packed sleeping quarters were looking the same. Some were already coughing. That deep, rattling sound of phlegm and infection welling up in their chest. The doors weren't barricaded or nailed shut when I left, but I bet they will be as soon as they figure out what happened. They're not going to let this spread. I'm certain they weren't going to let any of us leave anyway. Others started to run when they realized what was wrong. The entire town is empty. A literal ghost town. It's strangely quiet. A thin trickle of blood has started running out of my left nostril as I type this, and I know it's downhill from here. I'm sorry for what I've done, and I hope, I pray, they bomb the ever-living fuck out of this godforsaken place. I hope they burn it to the ground. My pulse is a jackhammer in my temples, and my vision is swimming. I can feel the pressure mounting behind my eyes. The first tickle of liquid fire is starting to creep into my lungs and throat. The hacking and vomiting can't be far behind. My breathing is becoming labored. If they don't wipe this place off the map, or if anyone gets out before they do, I won't be alive to see the damage I've caused. But please know that I wish I could take it all back. I hope, deep in my heart, that your death is quick, and you don't live long enough to find out what this does. My exit strategy is a 185 grain injection to the frontal lobe. It'll be quick and painless, compared to what everyone else here is about to go through. I don't want to find out what happens to the bodies if they're not burned immediately. Now that you know, go ahead. Google Niagara, Arkansas. See if it still exists. If it doesn't, maybe they were able to quarantine. Maybe you'll be okay.